Good evening and welcome to the return of the Halcyon Podcast. I'm your host, Lorne Wisely. Welcome back, one and all. It is the 23rd of October at the time of this recording. And apologies to any and all of you who made the horrific mistake of checking out my live stream that went. I think it was yesterday that actually uploaded, but it's taken some time to get it sorted and it's uploaded and there's like a minute and a half. I actually recorded for more like... more like 5.5 minutes to give some updates on the show, so apologies to anybody who bothered to check that out. Anyway, on to the podcast itself. I guess I should just touch on what I did on the live stream, really, and just talk about, you know, what the point of that was, and talk about what's coming up on Halcyon in terms of content that's coming out, and also just general events and stuff like that, just because, well, why the fuck not? So Halcyon, let's talk about that for a second. In terms of content for the show, we're going to be talking about more reviews, more blinks, more Halcyons, more Razor reviews, more of everything, really. It's just a question of scripting everything, filming everything, editing everything, which at the moment is tricky, just because of a five-day-a-week gig at work, which is interspersed between 2 sets of working days. I know that sounds tremendously complicated, but basically it means I have a day off on a Wednesday and a day off on a Sunday, which means that it's not easy to get shit done. That interspersed with the fact that I now have my daughter twice a week, and guys, it's insane how much fun it is hanging out with my little girl. So unfortunately, those 2 things have to take precedence. However, that's not to say that podcasting and making videos and content isn't enjoyable as balls. It just means that it sometimes has to take a backseat to my mental sanity in needing to chill out after days at work. Now we've got that out of the way. In terms of videos that are going to be coming up relatively shortly, we've got the video that just finished rendering yesterday, which is a review of John Wick 2. I've got another review of Logan coming up, as opposed to the epic look that I did a few months back. Dropping hopefully in the next day or 2 will also be an update video itself rather than just a podcast. Just explaining and saying thank you and yada yada yada. So I'll let that video speak for itself. So, with Halcyon out of the way, with the excuses out of the way, let's get to current events, shall we? WWE first. Should we get that out of the way for the people that don't actually care about WWE? So we had TLC last night. Some massive changes to the card prior to the event occurring just because of WWE appears to be having a lot of problems with its staff at the moment for a myriad of reasons. The chief among which appears to be an illness breakout amongst the stars, which I haven't really ever heard of before. This is probably the first time in WWE history that I've ever heard of an outbreak of that extent, really. Obviously, they've had a lot of injuries. In fact, in WrestleMania 32, I believe, the stat was that no champion that performed on WrestleMania 31 performed at 32, which is a staggering statistic when it's all said and done. When you also take into consideration the fact that 3 other departures are non-wrestling illness related, i.e. Kevin Owens, Nia Jax, and Neville, a lot of people were genuinely concerned that there was an exodus of some description happening from the WWE, which, if you think about it, was always insane to think about to begin with, because the reason why so many people perform for the WWE is the reason why many people are going to want to go to the WWE. It's where the money is, it's where the exposure is, it's the only place that can grow your brand to an exponential rate, which you can only really do there. You can make money on the indies and you can make money at other promotions and things of that nature, but ultimately, to grow your brand in the mass audience, you have to go to WWE. And make no mistake, as much money as people like Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega and all the other people that wrestle for New Japan, Ring of Honor, PWG, and a lot of other promotions that I'm failing to mention here, their goal ultimately is to get back to WWE only with greater leverage against Vince McMahon when they're negotiating for a contract. However, what it's turning out to be is that Neville is the only confirmed departure. Nia Jax, understand from a lot of sources that I'm reading up on, so I'm reading a lot of articles and listening to some podcasts. Dave Meltzer is obviously the source to go to, but then you hear a lot of other people that are in the mix as well. I think Jericho had some interesting insight with regards to Neville, so I think there's a very brief interview of him knocking about somewhere that you should probably check out if you're interested to see what's going on with Neville. But Neville is the only real confirmed departure, and that's just because he's been languishing in the cruiserweight division, not really being utilised to the full extent of his abilities. He's in prime physical condition, in the prime of his career. His character work's really amped up recently, and he's done all he can in the cruiserweight division. They're not planning on pushing him in the WWE, especially in the mid-card at least, maybe not even for an IC title stint, which would be, I think would probably be enough for him. Him feuding with Miz would be kind of cool, actually, in terms of work rate and styles. But there's no plans for that anytime soon, so it appears that he's asked for his release. Whether or not they can resolve that issue by getting him back in or negotiating a release of some description, who knows? It's odd that it's kind of come out of nowhere, but then again, you never hear about these things until after the fact, and then all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork and say, oh yeah, I totally knew about that. Yeah, I knew about that months ago, man. I can't believe you didn't know. So stupid. Nia Jax apparently has asked for time off just because she's been a bit beaten up and she's not feeling it and she's not crucial to their plans. Kevin Owens is the only interesting one, albeit I did check his tweets just to kind of go to the source of this, and apparently he's just said, look, it's just my family, no one else's business. I can't remember the tweet verbatim, but it was something along those lines. And to be honest, hey, we all got personal shit to deal with sometimes, and if he's in the position of being able to say, look, I need to go home, then more power to him. So you've also got Roman Reigns out, you've got Bray Wyatt, you've got a few other people that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But basically, the concern there was that that's ruined the card for TLC, especially considering that the Shield reuniting is this big, huge thing that's supposed to be getting Roman over. And the one person that's not going to be able to benefit from this match now is Roman Reigns, of all people. It's crazy how much WWE are trying so hard to get Roman pushed, to get the crowd to love him, and yet almost at every turn they can't seem to catch a break. It's crazy. Now, the match itself, unfortunately, I haven't seen. The TLC pay-per-view, I haven't had a chance to see it. I haven't had the network for maybe a month or so due to fiscal reasons. I mentioned this in my live stream, but no one would have ever heard it, but never mind. So I haven't had the network in a while. I plan to get it back next month, so I can start covering the pay-per-views on a more regular basis again in more thorough and more detail. But from what I understand of this one, the pay-per-view ultimately delivered a decent card. The big news with the departures of Bray Wyatt and Roman Reigns specifically, which altered two massive matches. Finn Balor versus Bray Wyatt wasn't considered a massive match, considering that they'd already fought. But Bray Wyatt versus Finn Balor, and the Shield taking on a team of 5: Braun Strowman, Kane, Miz, and the Bar, Cesaro, and Sheamus. So in their stead, they got AJ Styles over from SmackDown, who apparently has had to fly in from Chile or somewhere in South America from whatever reason. It looks like they couldn't get anyone else of note to sort of swap in for him. And then they've brought in Angle as a surrogate member of the Shield. Now, the only things I do know about this main event, about these matches, because I have happened to read what happens and seen a couple of clips and excerpts, is Finn Balor and AJ Styles two-sweeted each other at the end of their match, which I believe Finn Balor won with a coup de grace. And you've got Kurt Angle coming out in Shield gear. Now, some people are like, oh, I'm not that keen on that. Hey, I think that's fucking awesome. It's so... I freaking love it. I love that shit. I love that he's appropriated them, not the other way around, or that they've all come out in their individual gimmicks. I love how they kept it up with the Shield, and Kurt Angle, for a night at least, was a member of the Shield. That's going to be a moment we all look back on in years to come. Like, do you remember when Kurt Angle was part of the Shield for a night? man, that was so freaking cool. I marked out so hard. I had to tweet about it earlier on, just going, oh my god, I'm marking out right now. I'm actually kind of concerned, medically speaking, how hard I'm marking out right now. I may need to consult a physician. But for those of you who don't know, the Shield was a short-lived tag team, all things considered. I think they were only together for about a year. Or Shield tag team, they were a faction. Kind of did everything they could without winning the world title. Disbanded when Seth Rollins turned on them, and then they spent a year building their respective singles careers. However, given the nature of Roman's push, they've decided to get the Shield back together in order to try and get Roman over in his program, or build up to a program with Brock Lesnar. Which I think Ambrose and Rollins are probably happy with, considering that they literally haven't done anything of note recently. Ambrose had a run with the Intercontinental title, which really didn't do anything for him. Rollins has obviously had this program with Triple H, which threatened to be awesome at times, but for some reason ultimately felt a little bit undercooked. The payoff, their match, was just a bit clean, rather than the visceral reaction of Triple H abandoning him and attacking him and re-injuring his knee and yada yada yada. So this whole Shield gimmick, bringing it back, seemed like a really great move. And then Roman apparently contracts the mumps virus. So the only person who really standed to tremendously benefit from this in the eyes of the fans and getting him over is the one person who's ill. Oh, you couldn't write it better. As much as you might hate WWE sometimes, when they do try to give themselves a break, things do not get helped. But like I said, for me, it's an awesome moment where Kurt Angle, of all people, got to be in the Shield. And just seeing them come through the crowd to that music, it was fucking badass. I freaking loved it. I can't wait to watch the rest of the pay-per-view. I'll try and catch it next week once I'm paid and I can get the network again. I'll also start reviewing other stuff, I think. I might start reviewing specific things on the network, like the specials and things like that, just because I've watched them a million times, and I think it'd be good to kind of work through those a little bit. In terms of other events, let's talk about... What should we talk about? Let's talk about... Boxing-wise, Amaya McGregor and Mayweather video has just gone up. It has been copyright tagged, but it's still up on YouTube for some reason. It is also on VidMe as well, so be sure to go and check it out on VidMe if you've not seen it. Just because it's there's no advertisements, there's no one getting panged for watching it. There's no restrictions and limitations, and I can pretty much post whatever the fuck I want, which is awesome. What else? So content-wise, video dropping in the next day or two with regards to this channel going forward. Then you're probably going to get this John Wick review. Then there will probably be a couple of blinks afterwards that kind of satiate video-wise until I've managed to create some more content. Hopefully in the lead up to Christmas I'll get some time off. I'm not doing anything, so I'll be able to produce more content on that. And we go from there, really. In terms of other things, let's have a look at the sports. Ronald Koeman of Everton was sacked today, so for those of you who don't know, Premier League, you can turn off here if you want. Everton looked to be on the up this season. Their new ownership has sort of backed the manager with a lot of money. In fact, a couple of record signings in terms of their positions. I think record English goalkeeper. There was another record I can't recall off the top of my head, but a lot of signings. But the problem was apparently that they never replaced Romelu Lukaku, which, to my mind, these pundits coming out saying they never replaced Romelu Lukaku. Who are you going to replace him with? Name a striker who you could have gotten for that money. Now, they decided to do what Tottenham did, which is restructure the entire team. Look at how that's paying off for Tottenham right now. I get that a lot of their players went in and out, but ultimately... that whole situation, Tottenham are now a better side without Gareth Bale than they were with him in it now, and they will sustain that success. So the sale of Romelu Lukaku for £90 million, hey, I think it's ultimately going to pay dividends for the club. It's just a shame that Ronald Koeman, who sounds like a decent manager, looks like a decent manager, carries himself with a modicum of self-respect, had a good playing career, clearly had some acumen about him, otherwise he wouldn't have been a reasonable success at Southampton. He's doing what he could, and unfortunately it's cost him his job, which again is sad considering that we're not even at December at this point. The season's been going for a couple of months, And it's just the level of expectation that came from the amount of money that was spent that's ultimately cost him his job, bless him. I get that they're in the relegation zone, but it's far too early in the season to worry about that. And yes, maybe you could argue that they're aiming for top 4, but when you consider that you've got Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, and Arsenal all competing for 4 places, and they're tried and trusted in the top 4 places, mind you. Like I say, Tottenham maybe not so much, but now they are because they won it last season, and that's something I'll begrudgingly admit to. But what are you supposed to do if you're Everton? What are you supposed to do from a fan's perspective? You just want to see your team play well week in, week out. I get that. Give them time. Players need time to adapt to new skills, to new setups and teams sometimes. It happens, okay? So, yeah, never mind. We've got AJ, he's got a title defense coming up very, very shortly, which isn't really the thing we want to see. We want to see him against Wilder. We want to see him go up against, and try and unify the division. Now, that's really the next thing for him, considering that Fury's still a while off from coming back in any capacity, and that Vladimir Klitschko has finally retired from boxing. So I don't really want to see him fight Wyatt again. I get it would probably be a good match, but ultimately, he's done that. It's done. The debate rages on with Conor McGregor actually talking about my Mayweather-McGregor video. The debate now rages on about who Conor should be fighting next. And this is actually touching on something else in terms of UFC, by the way. I've had a look into their Fight Pass, which is effectively their version of WWE. I think it's £5 or £6 a month in the UK. To gain access to their library and then to every live fight, which is fucking insane. £5 a month, that's unreal. But yeah, I'm probably going to get that too. So for £15 a month, I get access to every WWE match, every UFC fight, so I can start covering that stuff on a regular-ish basis. So as far as UFC is concerned, God, I've just seen a picture of Takam, the guy Joshua's fighting. He looks sad. Bless him. You compare his neck to Joshua's and it's not even the same. It's scary to look at Joshua. He's just a mass. He's the most physically imposing boxer I think I've ever seen in terms of his size and physique. He's like an Olympian. Olympian God. He's just fucking ripped. It's crazy how shredded he is. But it is worth pointing out that his fight with Vladimir Klitschko, of which there is a video available on my channel where we covered it extensively, me and my boy Ryan, he is susceptible. He can gas. He's not actually that well defined of a boxer yet. He's still got some growing to do, which is encouraging. It means we've got a journey we can go on with Joshua. Even when he becomes world champion, like he is now, starts to unify the division, there are tests and trials ahead for him, which is great. It's awesome to see when a story continues to evolve and develop rather than just has a beginning and end. But yeah, as far as UFC and as far as Conor McGregor is concerned, there's 2 big fights that are being touted at the moment. Tony Ferguson and potentially Nate Diaz, but a lot of the debate at the moment seems to be centering around what the purists want and what the executives think the fans want. And it's that interesting toss-up between who do you believe. Now, Joe Rogan's podcast, which I listen to fairly frequently, if you were to believe that, a lot of these polls for, say, Ariel Helwani's show or any other MMA-centered show, they all want him to fight Tony Ferguson, and that it's like a fucking 90-10 split. And then if you listen to the executives, they're all of the opinion that the money's in the Nate Diaz fight, and that's what people really want to see. And then there's people on the other side of those 2 people that think Conor McGregor should be fighting Paulie Malignaggi instead. If you ask me, I think the money is in him fighting Nate Diaz, and I think that that's probably the fight that you're going to see, based on the fact that I think Conor knows that that's the biggest payday. It's also probably the safest of the 3 in terms of fights that he knows he could probably win versus the reward. And the reason why I say that is because Nate Diaz hasn't got a great record recently. He has now beaten him, albeit it was a very, very close decision. In fact, it was, I think, a point for 2 referees, and that separated it, which is that's how close it was. But he did knock him down in one of the rounds, and there's arguments to be made that Nate fell to his back as a means of defending himself. But yeah, that's the risk you take, I guess. as opposed to Tony Ferguson, who I don't know a tremendous amount about, I have to be honest. My knowledge of UFC is still developing over time, unfortunately, but Tony Ferguson is renowned as one of the best fighters in the UFC's division, 155 division at the moment. I think he's even interim champion, I can't remember. And then you've got Paulie Malignaggi, who potentially Conor could beat. I mean, we all saw the sparring video, but we don't know exactly how that video actually went because we didn't see all 12 rounds of it. However, that one poses potentially the biggest risk, because if he doesn't win, like, people would be expecting him to knock Malignaggi out or beat him. If he loses, even if it's by a decision, I think that's a massive body blow to his legacy in terms of being a fearsome fighter, or one who can pick apart someone who people... Because considering Malignaggi retired, and he's not renowned as a big puncher, and he's not renowned for work rate. He's a slick boxer, no doubt. He's got skill, but he wasn't ever a feared world champion. He was one of those... He was almost like an interim world champion, someone to hold the belt until a real person came along and beat him. I mean, even Amir Khan beat Paulie Malignaggi. I don't remember. I think he might have even knocked him out at some point. It's very difficult for me to remember, unfortunately, without having the ability to be able to Google shit and not fill time. One of the things that I've learned, by the way, by doing podcasts, and this is something people will only discover if you ever try it for yourself, is when you're doing a podcast, you have to remember to fill time. You have to be cognizant of the fact that people are listening, and you've got to be supplying them with information and supplying them with a reason to continue to pay attention, which isn't conducive to actually paying attention to other stuff, like looking up stuff. It's hard. It's not easy. Which is why I like going back and forth with people. So on this, if anyone's made it this far into the podcast, by the way, in which case you are an absolute darling. I really do need people to come and help me host the podcast. It can be whenever you are free. I'm telling you now. If you want to come on the show, if you want to be on the show, you want to host a show, whatever, just hit up your boy. I prefer doing this stuff with people anyway. It's always more fun. It's always a better time. Making content's great, but it's always fun making it with other people. It's always making my special little videos with them. Anywho, so it's coming back to the UFC. I don't know, that was a weird old tangent to go on. But yeah, as far as UFC is concerned, my money is on him fighting Nate Diaz next, just because of a risk to reward ratio just seems to be the best thing for Conor McGregor if he fights again, considering he just got $100 million for fighting one dude in one night, in which he didn't even really get that hurt. He got a little bit winded, and that's about it. So I think I'm going to conclude this podcast at this stage, just because I think I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. I haven't talked much about Arsenal. There really isn't a lot to talk about at the moment, apart from the fact that Mesut Ozil and Sanchez's deals seem to be winding down nicely, so it looks like we're going to lose both of those players in a free next season, which is fantastic. Although we've just come off the back of a 5-2 drubbing of Everton, which ultimately probably cost Koeman his job, unfortunately, which I don't like thinking about. I don't like managers losing their jobs, but hey, 5-2 to the Arsenal. You get in there, you mighty gunners. So, to recap, UFC, WWE coverage should increase with podcasts and specials and reviews and things of that nature, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. You'll be getting more reviews. It's just I've got some top 5s of this that I need to edit. I've got some more stuff that I need to script out. Halcyon's to do. I need to buy some new games and play them and review them and all the rest of that jazz. I have managed to finish The Division, so hopefully I'll be getting a review out on that soon. What else? Destiny, I'll probably try and play through as well. I've got some older games that I'm going to be playing through as well. Hopefully some weekly shows and some societal issues that I'll be doing. And obviously we'll be getting the podcast on a weekly basis from now on. I'll find time to record it once a week. I'm not going to bombard you guys, but once a week a podcast, one video a week for a review, some description. Once I start editing stuff again, it'll start flowing and churning out. And we shall go from there. So, to bring this podcast to a close, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening, if you've made it this far. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't checked out some of the content creators in the description below, I would implore you, plead with you, to do so. There's some great content creators, and they deserve your thoughts, your attention, and appreciation. So, I've been your host, Lorne Risley. This has been the Halcyon Podcast. Be sure to check me out on Twitter as well. I'm going to be tweeting a lot more recently just because I think it's probably an easier way to get news out and keep track of things rather than doing it on a podcast version of this. I will obviously continue to try and keep up to date with the comments. Apologies if you do message and comment and I don't get around to it these days. It's just I find it really hard to actually remember to look at them, so I apologise profusely. I do appreciate every single like, comment, share, view that you guys bestow upon me. It means the world. You have no idea. Hugs and kisses to every one of y'all. Yeah, hugs and kisses to every one of y'all. Yeah, I like that. I like giving kisses and cuddles to everybody. That's okay. You don't need to like kisses and cuddles on my watch. That was a weird juxtaposition to end the show with, but we'll end it with that nonetheless. So you guys, please take care of yourselves. Enjoy this week, whatever you're getting up to, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of the Halcyon Podcast.
This is a Tricky Beat production.